emphasis be to pay less people or more people? Why would we try to punish certain groups of people instead of paying all the people who are working? Why would we not do that? So I don't understand the process we've gone through here. We just had a chance to pay all the people. We had a chance to pay the air traffic controllers. We had a chance to pay the soldiers. We had a chance to pay all the government workers. And then there was an objection. So I don't understand what we've gone through here. But I, for one, believe that the workers should be paid. I, for one, believe that we should fix this permanently. The bill that I have presented is not just to pay them one time. It's to pay all workers all the time who are under contract, who show up for work, whether there's a shutdown or not. It's a permanent payday for those who do their job. That was the fix. It's not a niche bill. It's not to punish one group or the other group. It's to say, if you're working and there's a disagreement on the spending levels, that all workers are paid. I don't understand the objection, and I will continue to support paying all the workers all the time they're at work, whether there's a shutdown or not. I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Senator for Louisiana.
A point of clarification. Senator Paul has objected to my bill, or he wants me to modify it?
He objected to your bill.
Okay. I'm not done yet. Let me see. Maybe I wasn't clear. I apologize, Rand, if I wasn't clear. I support Rand's bill. It's actually Ron John's bill, but I support his idea. What I'm saying is if everybody over here isn't being paid, members of Congress shouldn't be paid. Okay? What Rand is saying, Senator Paul is saying is, let's pay everybody. And he's absolutely right. I support that. But I want to pass something. I want to pass something, Senator Durbin. We live in the real world. And my bill is more likely to pass the House and more likely to be signed by the President than Senator Paul's bill. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. I don't think that the House is going to pass Senator Paul's bill. And I don't think it's any secret. I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but President Trump does not consider Senator Paul to be part of the MAGA agenda. He said that. He's tweeted it about a squillion times. Am I wrong, Senator Durbin? I mean, he's tweeted it about a squillion times. And he's going to veto Senator Paul's bill because his name is on it. He's going to knock it to Uranus. He's going to knock it into a new zip code. And then what have Rand and I done? We put on a pretty performance. I want to pass something. Now, I tried to pass my bill preventing members of Congress from being paid. And you can pretty it up all you want to, but Rand objected. And I'm not judging him. I'm not judging anybody who's taking their salary. I'm not taking mine, but I'm not judging anybody. But what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And you either think members of Congress ought to be treated like everybody else, or you don't. You either think that we're more important and smarter and more virtuous than the American people, or you don't. And I think we ought to be treated the same. Now, having said that, I said I agreed with what Senator Paul said. I'm just worried his name on the bill is going to get knocked out of the park. So I'm going to put it in my name. Let's do what, it's not Senator Paul's bill, it's Senator Ron Johnson's bill. And what Ron John's, we call him Ron John, I'm sorry, Senator Ron Johnson from the wonderful state of Wisconsin. What Senator Johnson has proposed, and I've voted for repeatedly, says, look, if you're deemed an essential employee right now, you're working, but you're not being paid. Senator Johnson's bill says, we're going to pay you. I voted for that. It also says if you're furloughed, if you're deemed to be non-essential, then you're not working, but you will get paid once we come out of this shutdown. Does that make sense? That's what Senator Ron Johnson has proposed. And as I told my good friend Senator Paul, I agree with him. Senator Paul's name is on that bill. It's going to be vetoed 6 ways to Sunday. I'm going to try to put my name on the bill. Maybe it'll get passed, maybe it won't. But I think I have a better chance than Senator Paul. That's just my personal opinion. It's not meant to be personal. So, for that reason, Mr. President, I tried a third way. It's not my preferred way, but we got to get out of this mess. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 191 S302, which, as I've indicated, Mr. President, I think we've got a chance to pass the House with it, and I really don't think President Trump will veto it if I explain to him it's Senator Ron Johnson's bill. And I further ask that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Reserving the right to object, let me just say this. We should make sure that every federal worker gets the paycheck that they are owed. And the right way to do that is for Republicans to finally join us and get serious about passing a bipartisan CR so we do reopen the government and prevent health care costs from exploding. Instead, the bill that the senator from Louisiana is asking for unanimous consent for actually lets Donald Trump and Russ Vought decide who they want to pay during a shutdown, and that will allow them to stiff everyone else. President Trump has said he will only pay the people he wants to. He literally said, and I quote, "We're going to take care of our people. There are some people who really don't deserve to be taken care of, and we'll take care of them in a different way," unquote. This bill would actually let Trump do exactly that. Mr. President, we should make sure all of our workers get paid, not just the workers Trump likes. So the best way to do that is for, of course, Republicans to sit down with us as Democrats, work out a solution to reopen the government. If instead you do as the senator from Louisiana suggests here, then at a minimum, it should cover all employees. And that proposal is out on the table with Senator Van Hollen and Senator Peters. Thank you, Mr. President. For that reason, I object.
Objection is heard. Chair recognizes the senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, look, I get it. You know, this is why we're in a shutdown. I just proposed a bill, was my third choice, but it's better than nothing, to say everybody gets paid. And my good friend from Washington State objected. I don't know what else to do. I voted 14 times to open up government. I can't change the election. President Trump was duly elected President of the United States. He was, in a free election. And the American people spoke. And some of my colleagues are upset about that. In fact, they hate the president so much, they've shut down government. They hate him so much that if President Trump came out in favor of breathing to live, they would hold their breath. It's not rational. And I just don't know what else to do. All I can tell my Democratic friends is, look, reasonable people disagree, and I get it. But you're just being too emotional. You need to go drink a big, old, cold, tall glass of get over it and realize that President Trump is the President of the United States. Don't shut government down because of it. Mr. President, you've been really patient. And even though the parliamentarian tried to get you to dodge my questions, you answered them straight up, and I really appreciate it. With that, I yield. No, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alston-Brooks.
I tell you, the stupid didn't hear, darling.
Mr. President,
Chair recognizes the senator from Kentucky.
Ask unanimous consent that we vitiate the quorum call.
Without objection.
For decades, the globalists in Washington have led our country into one disastrous foreign war after another, whether in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and now potentially Venezuela. The formula is always the same. Proclaim that the regime of the targeted country poses such a threat to the American way of life that the only thing we can do is go to war. Tell them that our intervention is a noble effort, one that will bring security at home and liberty to foreign lands, topple the government, and declare a new age of freedom. The warmongers have recycled these experiments in regime change again and again. And what has it brought? Instability, chaos, suffering, and resentment. It is the height of arrogance to think we can forcibly remove the dictatorship in Venezuela and expect a different result. We should learn from history. Liberty cannot be imposed at the point of a foreign bayonet. The United States maintains the most formidable military in human history. Of course, we have the capability of overthrowing the Maduro regime, just like we had the power to overthrow Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi. But what comes next? Is anyone thinking about the potential blowback that such a campaign could entail? Overthrowing the Maduro regime risks creating more regional instability, not less. The breakdown of state authority may create a power vacuum that the very drug cartels the administration is ostensibly trying to destroy could exploit. Just as our misguided interventions in the Middle East led to the proliferation of terrorist organizations, this could happen in Venezuela, but this time with the proliferation of organized crime. We could swell the ranks of the cartels with new recruits. Remember what happened in Iraq, the de-Baathification of Iraq, removing all of the previous government soldiers. They had no place to go. They were used to being paid. They wanted money, and they went and worked and became terrorists. Where do you think the tens of thousands of Venezuelan soldiers and desperate civilians will turn when their livelihood suddenly disappears? It may be the drug cartels. In its hubris, Washington may very well empower the cartels and make the drug problem in our hemisphere worse. Certainly, any war will exacerbate the already precarious humanitarian crisis in Venezuela and lead to mass migration into neighboring countries already struggling under the strain of millions of refugees. And rest assured, many of those who flee the disaster of the war that will come will make their way to the United States. Most consequentially, any military operation comes with the risk that American service members will be killed or wounded. We owe it to our service members to only send them into harm's way when vital American interests are at stake. Who is in charge of Venezuela does not constitute such an interest. We've seen chaos emerge from our misguided wars before. We overthrew Saddam Hussein thinking Iraq will be transformed into this great Jeffersonian democracy. Instead, what occurred was an insurgency that led to some of the most brutal sectarian violence in living memory. Washington's foolish invasion empowered radical jihadists and ultimately led to the rise of ISIS, which posed a much greater threat to Americans than Saddam Hussein ever did. A similar story unfolded in Libya. In 2011, our forces aided the rebels to oust Muammar Gaddafi. The result was a brutal 6-year war that saw the proliferation of jihadist groups and the widespread human rights violations, including the resurgence of slavery. Weapons were spread throughout Africa. Our intervention helped spur mass migration into Europe and contributed to widespread instability across Africa as weapons flowed from Libya into the Sahel and Sub-Sahara, where they continue to fuel conflicts and terrorism to this day. Libya is still highly unstable, and the conflict constantly threatens to reignite. Like Saddam and Gaddafi, Maduro is unmistakably a dictator. He's a bad guy. He suppresses freedom of speech. He controls his people. There's no free voting. He treats people poorly, and that's an understatement. But there are a lot of bad guys in the world. There are a lot of dictators. There's a lot of socialism leading to starvation. It doesn't mean that the United States should carelessly risk its blood and treasure to go and topple every one of them. And as we've seen all too well in recent decades, foreign military interventions often end up making things worse. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Imagine the anarchy that followed our wars in the Middle East. Do we really want to risk creating similar conditions in our own backyard? With over 10,000 U.S. troops, 8 warships, a Virginia-class submarine, and dozens of F-35s already in the Caribbean, the USS Gerald Ford Strike Group surging towards the region, the stage for folly is set. We are told that only drug dealers are the target of U.S. operations, but the consolidation of the largest U.S. force in the Caribbean in 35 years suggests that regime change may very well be the intended goal. The use of lethal force and our massive military buildup is an invitation to retaliation. Attacked countries often attack back. It is our soldiers in the field of battle, not the senators on this floor, that will bear the brunt of the retaliation. By then, the time for debate will have passed. The Senate will have once again excused itself from the responsibility of governing, and the United States will once again be at war. Those who argue that small boats in the Caribbean are so dangerous that they weren't being blown out of the water must explain why, when some of the individuals happen to survive, they are not detained. The drugs are not scooped up and tested. The survivors are simply sent back to their country of origin. Wouldn't we ask who they work for? Wouldn't we detain them? Wouldn't we present evidence to a court and say what should be done with these survivors? We summarily shoot them when we don't know who they are, but once we pick them up, we don't summarily kill them. We don't even try them. The United States has now repatriated 2 of these survivors to Colombia and Ecuador. If, as we are told, these groups constitute our threat to our security equal to al-Qaeda, that they are somehow narco-terrorists, then why are we allowing these individuals to go home? The truth is that these arguments are nonsensical. Drug traffickers aren't equivalent to al-Qaeda, and the executive branch does not have the authority to kill at will anyone, anywhere, at any time, for any reason. Repatriating survivors of the strikes suggests that the administration's lawyers are not so confident that their arguments about Article 2 authority will survive legal scrutiny. Or perhaps they're not confident that they can even bring drug convictions in a court. In addition to the strategic malpractice of pursuing regime change in Venezuela, there is also the inconvenient fact that the president simply does not have the authority to unilaterally launch wars. The founders had the foresight to recognize that the executive branch is the branch most prone to war, and they therefore made it clear in the Constitution that Congress maintains the exclusive power to declare war. Part of President Trump's broad appeal was his strong contempt for the neocons on the right and the liberal internationalists on the left who never met a war they didn't want someone else's children to fight. He rightfully criticized those in Washington who supported nation-building fantasies throughout the Middle East, yet now certain individuals within the administration seek to lead the president astray. I would advise President Trump to remember the wise words of his inaugural address, when President Trump said, "We will measure our success by the wars we never get into." President Trump, do not allow the warmongers in Washington to drag you into an unnecessary war of choice. Washington has spent decades, trillions of dollars, thousands of lives, trying to remake other countries in our image. The American people are sick and tired of their elected representatives in Congress standing idly by and saying, "Nothing to see here. The president can do whatever he wants," while their sons and daughters are sent to fight wars in distant lands. As the administration authorizes covert CIA action in Venezuela and surges U.S. forces in the region, including our most advanced aircraft carrier, the risk of imminent involvement in hostilities is evident. It is time that the first branch of government puts America first. The majority party of this institution, should stand by the principles of restraint as espoused by President Trump's promise to the American people. Honor and statesmanship should prevent the Senate from sitting idly by while elements within this administration blunder America into another foreign war. The American soldiers, their families, and the American people deserve a debate and a vote before we send our armed forces into war. If you agree that our soldiers and their families deserve at least this much, vote yes on this resolution. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, I want to thank Senator Kaine for Senate Joint Resolution 90 and ask unanimous consent to be added as a co-sponsor.
Without objection.
We are here debating a central constitutional precept, and I'm glad we are. Throughout my career in the House and Senate, I have tried to be consistent on this issue and respect the Constitution and its wisdom. I'm going to say 6 words I very rarely, if ever, have said in my entire career in Congress. I agree with Senator Rand Paul. I believe what he has said on the floor today is, in fact, the way I feel about what this section of the Constitution means. In one of the previous debates with the War Powers Resolution, War Powers Act being debated on the floor, Senator Kaine reminded us of that historic moment when the Founding Fathers decided to write this Constitution, which we've all sworn to uphold and defend. And leading that Constitutional Convention, of course, was the greatest general then and still in the history of the United States, George Washington. Despite the fact that he was in the room and leading the conversation about what Constitution would govern this country, Article 1, Section 8 put in a provision and basically said, when it comes to a future war, even if you're president, General Washington, the Congress will have the power to decide whether we go to war. Senator Kaine made that point in an earlier debate, and I thought it was well worth repeating. Let me say a word about Venezuela. In 2018, I had the opportunity to visit Venezuela, a once prosperous, albeit imperfect democracy, suffering terrible economic and political decline under the disgraceful and failed leadership of Nicolas Maduro. I told then President Maduro that if he rigged any upcoming elections, Venezuelans would be even more isolated and endure further unnecessary suffering. He went ahead with a sham election anyway, leading to even more cruelty and the exodus of literally millions of Venezuelans, some to the United States. Last July, Venezuela had another presidential election during which the regime, the Maduro regime, arbitrarily blocked opposition candidates from the ballot and tried to undermine the pre-electoral process. Nonetheless, more than 10 million Venezuelans showed up to vote, and results meticulously documented by credible election monitors showed a sweeping victory for opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez. Maduro and his criminal enablers again refused to respect the rules and shamelessly refused to swear in legitimately chosen President Gonzalez. So let me make it clear. Nicolas Maduro is an illegitimate leader guilty of turning Venezuela into a failed state, one that has caused terrible suffering and misery for the people who live there. This is not the question at hand. As I have long said, it is long overdue that the result of last year's elections be respected in Venezuela. But let me be clear on a position I've also held for a long time, regardless of who's been in the White House. Only Congress under the Constitution has the power to declare war. Article 1, Section 8 is clear on this issue, and for good reason. Only the people's elected representatives should have the awesome power to send our sons and daughters into armed conflict. I remember thinking about this in personal terms during the era of the Vietnam War when I was a college student, thinking about the fact that there had not been any formal declaration of war in Vietnam, and yet over 40,000 of my brothers and sisters gave their lives in that conflict. Our founding fathers were wise in this regard and well aware of human history, in which kings and unelected leaders sent their people into war for personal gain without any public consent. Congress overwhelmingly reaffirmed this key constitutional provision when it passed the War Powers Act in 1973 over the veto of then-President Richard Nixon. Under the law, the President has the authority to approve military attacks as a response to an imminent threat or with the expressed authorization of Congress. I do not believe these conditions have been met in this situation. We in Congress have already ceded too much of our constitutional authority on appropriations and other key items to the President. This body must not do so regarding matters of war. Mr. President, I think about the idea of a war breaking out between the United States and Venezuela. Certainly picking up boats, unarmed boats in the ocean is an easy task for our great military. But let's keep in mind, we live in a world where there's asymmetric power. What am I talking about? Take a look at what the drones, many of them pretty cheap pieces of equipment, have wrought in countries like Ukraine in the midst of their war. What would turn out to be a massive force by the United States sent down to the Caribbean to be a show of force may be subject to attack even by Venezuela, the smallest and poorly armed country that it is. So I would say that if we're thinking clearly about this, we would think long and hard before we engaged in any conflict with Venezuela. That's what Article 1, Section 8 is about. The American people, before being asked to give any sons and daughters and risk their lives in a war, have to have a voice in the process, and they do that through members of Congress and through our Constitution. That is what Senator Kaine of Virginia reminds us of today. That's why I'll support Senate Joint Resolution 90, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Chair recognizes the senator from Idaho.
we're not in a quorum call, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Mr. President, I rise today to respond to Senator Kane's Senate Joint Resolution number 90. And I would like to state clearly the administration is very much opposed to this resolution. And they have put out a policy statement as of today stating that they strongly oppose Senate Joint Resolution number 90. Without going into all the details, they say that Senate Joint Resolution 90 fails to account for the extraordinary national security threat posed by transnational violent drug trafficking cartels and narco-terrorists operating in and around the Caribbean Sea. That really says it all. And not much more needs to be said, but I do have a few comments on this. President Trump has taken decisive action to protect thousands of Americans from lethal narcotics. He's kept drugs off the streets, kept children alive, and eliminated narco-terrorists who have been profiting off of the deaths of members of our communities. These people have been transmitting drugs into the United States via a lot of different ways. One of them was by vessels, shipping vessels in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific Ocean. But some Democrat members and members of the media have claimed that President Trump does not have the authority to conduct these strikes. I'll tell you right now, that is plain wrong. I myself and many of my colleagues have sat recently through hours of briefings and analysis by government legal departments and attorneys who have studied this issue. Unanimously, they have concluded that the action taken by President Trump is absolutely lawful. As Commander-in-Chief, the President sees a group of terrorists planning to harm America or our allies. He has the right, not only the right, but the duty to do something about it. He's taken an oath to protect this country. And I and the majority of my colleagues are glad that the President took this action. Now, for some reason which I don't understand, the people who oppose the President's action somehow make a differentiation between drugs and explosives. If these were explosives that were on ships being brought to the United States by terrorist organizations to be distributed through the United States and kill and maim Americans, people would say nothing about it. These drugs are no different than that. They do the exact same thing. They kill people by the thousands in the United States. President Trump is doing what needs to be done to protect the American people, just as he has done before. Take, for example, the recent defensive strikes against the Houthis in the Red Sea. This went on for some time. When the Houthis threatened the U.S. ships in the Red Sea, citing Article 2 of the Constitution, the President took action to eliminate the terrorists threatening our troops and U.S. commercial shipping in the Red Sea. These strikes are fully compliant with the War Powers Resolution and fully compliant with the President's Article 2 constitutional authority as Commander-in-Chief of our armed forces. Prior presidents did not need, nor did they seek congressional authorization to defend America in this Western Hemisphere. Panama and Grenada are two examples that Republican presidents also took action in our own backyard to go after threats to the American people. And these strikes have been discreet, they've been intermittent, with little risk, if any, to United States servicemen. No 60-day clock has been triggered, as many Democrats have tried to argue today. I wish my colleagues would join me here today in congratulating the President for what he has done and thanking the President for what he's done on behalf of the many parents who will not have to bury their children early and who will never know that they were saved from this. But there is no doubt, none whatsoever, that every time we take a strike and we send tons of these poisonous drugs to the bottom of the ocean, thousands of American lives have been saved. So, Mr. President, thank you for what you're doing. On behalf of all those Americans who will be saved from these poisonous drugs, thank you, and continue to do what you're doing. I object to the resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Chair recognizes the senator from Virginia.
I rise for closing comments about Senate Joint Resolution 90. My colleague and friend from Idaho has talked about strikes on boats. That's not what this is about. This is about the prospect, openly discussed by the President, for a land invasion of a sovereign nation of Venezuela. The President has not asserted a legal rationale for it. The documents that we've read in the classified facility talk about a legal rationale for strikes in international waters, but specifically do not contain a legal rationale for striking a sovereign nation. This is not about President Trump. It's about the Constitution, and it's about Congress. Do we take seriously the most important responsibility in Article 1, that war should not be declared without Congress? Venezuela is a nation of 30 million people. They have a very capable military because they've purchased weapons from our adversaries like Russia and Iran. The massing of U.S. forces around Venezuela pose a serious risk of a miscommunication or a use of those weapons against Americans. I might remind my colleagues that the United States attacked Grenada in 1983. Grenada was an island with a population of less than 100,000. 19 American soldiers died in that attack. 152 American soldiers were wounded in that attack. 24 civilians who were at a mental hospital that was bombed by accident were killed in that attack. An attack against a population poorly armed, without weapons, of 113,000 people caused 19 soldiers to lose their lives and 152 to be injured. A Venezuela of 30 million people is a completely different kind of military operation. And we would not expect it to go perfectly, because none ever go perfectly. How will you respond to an American family who loses the life of a child, or whose child is injured in the event of a war against Venezuela, when they ask you, why did you not even think it was important enough to have a debate and vote in the United States Senate? Why did you let this president, why would you let any president make that decision on his or her own without you even weighing in? I'll close with this, Mr. President. I have stood on this floor and made this same argument when the president is a Democrat. It happened often during President Obama's term, and I made the same argument against unilateral executive war when the president was a Democrat as I am now making when the president is a Republican. And I believe, as I stand here today, if these same facts were applying, strikes on boats, massing of warships, the president saying he's authorized covert action, the president saying he's looked at land targets, and that president was Joe Biden or Barack Obama, I believe I would have many Republicans voting with me on this resolution, not because they don't like President Biden or President Obama, but because they would take this responsibility, no war without Congress, that we pledge an oath to because it's in the Constitution we pledge an oath to, they would take it seriously. I urge you to take this as seriously as you would take it if the president were a Democrat. It shouldn't matter. We should not be going to war without a vote of Congress. The lives of our troops are at stake. Respect them and their families, and please vote yes on the resolution. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the Minority Leader.
Mr. President, first let me thank our great senator from Virginia, Senator Kaine. He has been the most vigilant watchdog against over-encroachment of the military. He has been the most vigorous watchdog at making sure Congress's power to make war and engage in acts of war are upheld. There are many presidents, as Senator Kaine pointed out, who try to push the boundaries, but no president has pushed the boundaries more than President Trump. And Americans need Kaine here to do just what he is doing. Thank you, Senator Kaine. I also want to thank Senator Paul, Senator Schiff, for championing this resolution today. because the Senate will vote to discharge a resolution that says two simple things. First, it affirms that the United States will always support our troops when they act to protect the American people and themselves from foreign attack. But it also says that if Donald Trump wants to engage in military hostilities against Venezuela, he must seek authorization from Congress first. As we speak, America's largest aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, is on its way to the Caribbean. It's part of the largest military buildup in our hemisphere we've seen in decades. According to press reports, Donald Trump is considering military action on Venezuelan territory. But it also sounds like nobody really knows what the plan is because, like so many other things with Donald Trump, he keeps changing his mind. Who knows what he'll do tomorrow? To date, we have heard no clear goals, no clear timetable, no clear explanation for what Donald Trump's objective is in Venezuela. This is unacceptable and it's dangerous. Even in our briefing with Secretary Rubio yesterday, we walked out of the room with more questions than answers. We need a clear explanation. I am demanding a full senator's briefing on this issue, Venezuela, and its intervention there, at once. In the meantime, the Senate must act today to discharge this resolution. Because Donald Trump seems ready to lead our troops over the Rubicon with a blindfold over his eyes, and that is a recipe for catastrophe. Congress must assert its authority on matters of war and peace, and time is of the essence. Multiple warships have been moved from other ports of the world to be just off the coast of Venezuela, and by some estimates, 10% of the Navy's deployed assets are now in the Southern Command area of responsibility. These actions certainly do not sound like mere drug enforcement against organized criminals. Not even close. These are actions you take before you consider launching a major military operation against another country. And that authority, the Constitution is clear, must come from Congress. Nobody here denies the Maduro regime is horrific and undemocratic, and we also agree that drug traffickers and organized criminals who poison Americans ought to be tracked down and dismantled. That was why, when I was Majority Leader, Congress provided billions for counter-narcotics operations and granted sweeping authorities to combat the flow of narcotics and opioids like fentanyl. And if we must do more, we should. We should help law enforcement, intelligence operators, federal agents to dismantle criminal networks and drug smugglers. But saber-rattling and military explanation are a poor substitute for a real narcotics strategy, counter-narcotics strategy. I ask my colleagues, remember what Colin Powell used to say about military force? You break it, you own it. It's the old Pottery Barn rule. This is the danger of unilateral attacks against Venezuela. If we break it, we're going to own it. The mere thought of another endless war ought to make American people sick to their stomachs. So today, the Senate must act to uphold the Constitution, uphold our national security, and reaffirm the authority of Congress to have its proper say on matters of war and peace. I yield the floor. Just yield the floor.
The question occurs on the motion to discharge. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso.
Well, 11.
Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Mr. Booker. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Brett. Mr. Budd. Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoban, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Moreno, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Cantwell, Coons, Cortez Masto, Durbin, Kim, Merkley, Padilla, Paul, Warner, Wyden. Mr. Schumer, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Barrasso, Capito, Cornyn, Cotton, Kramer, Curtis, Daines, Fisher, Haggerty, Hawley, Husted, Hyde-Smith, Kennedy, Langford, Lee, McCormick, Moran, Moreno, Mullen, Ricketts, Scott of South Carolina, Sheehy, Tillis. Mr. Thune, no. Mr. Risch, no. Ms. Ernst, no. Mr. Gallego, aye. Mr. Markey, aye. Mr. Fetterman, aye. Mr. Tuberville, no. Mr. Van Hollen, aye. Mr. Rounds, no. Mrs. Blackburn, no. Mr. Bennett, aye. Mr. Heinrich, aye. Mr. Peters, aye. Ms. Baldwin, aye. Mrs. Murray, aye. Ms. Slotkin, aye. Mr. Grassley, no. Mr. Marshall, no. Mrs. Britt, no. Mr. Reed, aye. Mr. Whitehouse, aye. Ms. Also Brooks. Ms. Also Brooks, aye. Mr. Cassidy. Mr. Cassidy, no. Mr. Schiff. Mr. Schiff, aye. Ms. Hirono. Ms. Hirono, aye. Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham, no. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, aye. Ms. Hassan. Ms. Hassan, aye. Mr. Schatz. Mr. Schatz, aye. Ms. Duckworth. Ms. Duckworth, aye. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott of Florida, no. Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith, aye. Mr. Hickenlooper. Mr. Hickenlooper, aye. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Crapo, no. Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks, no. Mrs. Moody. Mrs. Moody, no. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz, no. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, aye. Mr. McConnell, no. Ms. Warren, aye. Mr. Johnson, no. Mr. Kelly, aye. Mr. King, aye. Mr. Ossoff, aye. Mr. Warnock, aye. Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Mr. Sanders, aye. Mr. Justice, no. Mr. Welch, aye. Mr. Hoven, no. Mr. Wicker, no. Ms. Lummis, no. Mr. Lujan, Mr. Lujan, aye. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mr. Schmidt, no. Mr. Kane, aye. Mrs. Gillibrand, aye. Mr. Blumenthal, aye. Mr. Bozeman, no. Ms. Blunt Rochester, aye. Mr. Budd, no. Ms. Rosen, aye. Mr. Booker, aye. Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Sullivan. No. Ms. Collins, no. Mr. Young, no. Ms. Murkowski, aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 49, the nays are 51, and the motion is not agreed to. Chair recognizes the Majority Whip.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I have 5 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stands adjourned until 12 noon on Friday, November 7th, that following the prayer and the pledge, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, the time for the 2 leaders be reserved for the use later in the day, and the Senate be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, if there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it stand adjourned until the previous order.
Senate stands adjourned until noon tomorrow.